It's time for a reality check, guys. Some of you are not going to win your Dynasty League this year. And while that might be a tough pill to swallow so early in the season, there is no shame in folding or rebuilding if you've been dealt a bad hand. Now, rebuilding is an extremely effective Dynasty strategy when done correctly, but done incorrectly, it can set your team back multiple seasons. So all I ask is that you watch this video to the end before you make any rash decisions about throwing in the towel on the 2025 season. My name is Paul, this is Pure Potential. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment. Let's get into it. So rebuilding for our newer Dynasty managers is a process that involves tearing down your Dynasty team, trading away most of your players, accumulating draft picks. You're forfeiting the current season in order to have a more valuable roster and hopefully a more productive roster in future years. Now, rebuilding does not mean just giving up on the current season. It is not a passive process. You don't want to be a complacent Dynasty manager who just checks out when the season is going poorly, because most of the assets on your team right now are going to start losing value over time. And when the calendar flips over to January, you will find yourself in an even worse position. Rebuilding is an active process that actually leverages the fact that you're not trying to score points now to help you get ahead of the competition in the future. And it helps you bring your Dynasty team back from the dead like a phoenix rising from the ashes. But before we talk about how to rebuild, we do need to talk about when. Because this isn't something you want to rush into unnecessarily. Your Dynasty team can overcome some adversity. And the super teams in your league, they don't win as often as you think. So before you decide to rebuild, first, I want you to consider your win-loss record, your points scored, and your current roster value. As far as win-loss record, this is pretty simple. If you're 3-0, you are not rebuilding. I don't care if you think your team is a fraudulent house of cards, you are practically in the playoffs already. If you're 2-1, you're also probably not rebuilding unless your team is an absolute mess. Like your team is 11th in points scored and you only have one quarterback and you're starting Kenny Gainwell at the RB2 spot. If that's the case, maybe it's time to rebuild. But if you just have a totally average 2-1 team and you want to rebuild because other teams in your league are too good and you can't keep up, I forbid it. Okay, you are still competing. You are not allowed to call it just yet. It's really the 1-2 teams and especially the 0-3 teams that should be considering a rebuild at this point in the season. But your record can be deceiving. So you also want to look at points scored. You want to go over to that standings page and don't just look at where you're sitting in the standings. Go over to the right side and look at the points that you've scored this year. And if you want, you can even look at your potential points. Maybe you just suck at setting your lineup and you actually have a higher potential points than total points. But a 1-2 team that is 4th in points scored is a lot different than a 1-2 team that's 10th. There's more reason to believe you've just had bad luck with matchups, that your team can turn it around in the future, as opposed to being at the bottom of the standings and the bottom of the points scored. Now, there's no magic number here. I wish I could tell you an exact number, like if you're 6th in points, keep contending, but if you're 7th, then tank. It just doesn't work that way. It's not that simple, but it's just another data point to inform your decision, right? Maybe your team has been better than you think, but unlucky with matchups. Or maybe it's been worse than you think, and that is the reality check that you need to go ahead and pull the plug. And the last factor, which I think is the most likely to be overlooked, is your current roster value. If you already have a really valuable roster with lots of picks, lots of young players, I'm less likely to recommend a rebuild because you have already done the hard part. The point of a rebuild is to build a roster that's valuable, and then you can use that value to acquire productive players. If you already have a really valuable team, you've already done it. Yes, you could tank and make your team even more valuable, and maybe theoretically that could add an extra year or two to your contending window. But I said this last year, you don't want to just hoard your buying power like a sleeping dragon. Okay, the ultimate goal here is to win. So if you are 1-2 and you've got a slightly below average starting lineup, but you've also got 7 firsts, use them. Go and trade for some players. You can make some tactical buys to keep hope alive this year without really sacrificing future years. Now, if you're not sure where your team stands in terms of overall value, you can go and check out power rankings tools on sites like Dynasty Daddy or Keep Trade Cut, or you could look at the league dashboard on Fantasy Calc. These are all sites that are going to take the values they have for players, and they're going to use that to stack up all the teams in the league, not only as far as their competitive ability, but also roster value. And, maybe looking at more than one and sort of averaging them out can give you a fair look at where you sit in terms of total value. But if you have a really valuable team, you probably know, right? If you have a lot of picks, you have a lot of young players, you're probably aware of that. And all I'm saying is you don't need to stubbornly cling to all of those assets when maybe there is an opening for you to be competitive this season and not just throw away another buy-in. So those are the basic considerations when you're deciding if you're going to rebuild. You also might want to check your upcoming schedule. Maybe you feel like your team is underperforming, but it could bounce back on its own without making any major trades. You have somebody like Drake London, for example, who has been really unproductive, but also getting a lot of targets, is a really good player. You know, you think he could turn it around. If 2 of your next 3 matchups are against terrible teams where you're a heavy favorite, it might be a good idea to just ride it out for now and see how your team is performing in a couple of weeks, especially if your league's draft order is based on max points for and not record, which I think it should be. I think that's the best way to do it. And if that's the case, you're not really hurting yourself by waiting and seeing how things go, because if your team continues to suck, your max points are still going to be low and you can still pivot to a rebuild in a couple of weeks. You should also be more inclined to stick it out for the year if you don't have your own first round pick in the 2026 class, because a huge benefit to rebuilding is the ability to get that early first round pick, especially the 101. Even if you don't end up drafting a rookie in that spot, it just gives you so much more flexibility and value to work with, as opposed to having the 105, the 106. You can see the startup ADP here from this summer. Ashton Genty was going at the 201 in startups, a full round ahead of the next closest rookie, which was Amarian Hampton. And if you just coasted all the way to a 105 or a 106 pick rather than tanking, that was the difference of like 2.5 or 3 rounds of startup value. It's like getting an extra first, even more than a first, in roster value on your team just by being proactive in tanking. So this isn't to say that you should never rebuild if you don't have your first, but it's less urgent because you don't need to race to the bottom of the standings like you would otherwise. You're not trying to beat other teams there to the 101. But as soon as you know that you're not making the playoffs or it's just not your year, you still want to be flipping players for picks. You want to be trying to move older players for younger players. All of that's still going to help you next year with or without your first. It just means that you're more inclined to wait it out and see if you can beat the odds with an 0-3 team. And finally, just to close out this portion of the video, I want to show you one of my teams where I'm just not ready to tear it all down yet. This team has Jackson Dart, Trevor Lawrence, and Geno Smith at quarterback, Ashton Genty, Saquon Barkley, rest in peace, James Conner, and a bunch of Jags at running back, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen at wide receiver, and Brock Bowers, David Njoku at tight end. I don't have any 2026 picks right now. I do have all my 2027 picks pretty much, but I'm 1-2. I am 7th in points scored. I am favored to win in week 4. So I'm not tearing this team down. Again, I don't have my own first. There's no rush for me to sell off all my pieces. It has not been an ideal run out. I really, really wish James Conner was healthy. This is a start 11 league and it can get pretty tight with depth. I wish Genty and Bowers and Justin Jefferson were not all underperforming at the same time. But I think when you look at this roster, it's pretty far from being over. So we will persist another week and another week after that, and we will see if I can dig myself out of this hole. But I'm not just going to fold prematurely because things don't look like all sunshine and rainbows right now. So that covers when to rebuild. Now let's get into the how. And if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing to the channel to see more of my Dynasty content in the future. We got new videos each and every week. First of all, in this conversation, let's talk about time frame. Most of the time, a rebuild should be a 1-year process, as in you spend the rest of this season accumulating value and you are right back in the playoff conversation next year. If you're looking at your roster and you're thinking there is no way that you could possibly compete next year, you've either made some really, really rough decisions or you took over a brutal orphan team and hopefully this year's been paid for. And I'm not here to judge you on that. I've been there with the 2-year rebuild. I've made bad moves. I've totally destroyed teams. It's part of why I'm so cautious about trading future firsts, because a lot of teams that thought they would be cruising to the playoffs right now are sitting at 1-2 or 0-3, and they are staring down some really, really tough decisions at the moment. But whatever your timeline is, your next moves are going to be pretty much the same. You want to trade away your depreciating assets. Anyone that you think is likely to be worth less in February than they are today. That is really obvious with players like Keenan Allen, Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford, guys that are beyond the age apex, near the ends of their careers. It also would include pretty much any running back. There's just so much volatility at the position. It's really hard to bet on any of these guys to maintain or grow their value over the course of the season. Some of them are obviously going to do it, but I have found in my experience, other than maybe rookie running backs, you pretty much just want to move on from those guys if you can. And they tend to have the highest value right now in the middle of the season with bye weeks and injuries starting to stack up. But this label of depreciating asset doesn't just apply to old players and running backs. I wouldn't be actively holding on to guys like Jordan Addison or Tucker Kraft either. Now, if you can't get a fair return for those types of players, they're not preventing you from getting the 101, then by all means, you can keep them. But you shouldn't just be content selling everybody that's over 25 and calling it a day. Rookie picks are just a safer store of value, and they give you more trade flexibility down the line. So there shouldn't be many players that are off limits in trades. I think it's fine to keep superstar players like Lamar Jackson or Brock Bowers or Malik Neighbors, because those players are really, really hard to acquire in trades later on. Otherwise, I really only want to roster rookies and maybe some backup quarterbacks or running backs that aren't going to score many points, but can be flipped for an easy profit if an injury happens. So that's who you're trading away, and you want to be trading for any assets that are likely to be worth more later on than they are right now. Rookie picks are the gold standard because they don't score points and they are virtually guaranteed to be worth more later than they are now. And there is no such thing as having too many picks in a rebuild. You want all the picks. You want firsts, seconds, thirds, fourths. You want 2026, 2027, 2028. You want as many picks as you can really get your hands on. But you should be prioritizing first round picks. You want to try to package multiple assets together on your team to get a first rather than just selling all your players individually. I'll show you an example of this from one of my leagues at the end of the video, but you want firsts because the value upside is just so much higher relative to other picks. An early first is one of the most valuable assets that you can have in Dynasty, and there is still time left in the season for teams that look like contenders to flame out and miss the playoffs entirely, and you want to have those teams' first round picks. And even if you end up with a bunch of late firsts, you're still going to be profiting on those trades that you made more than likely, and it's going to open up a ton of trade opportunities later on when people are trying to get back into that first round. Or it's just going to give you access to a bunch of prospects with high ceilings, right? Like we've seen major dynasty hits come out of the late first in recent years. It's a good place to be. Sometimes though, I will specifically go after firsts that are in future years, like 2027 firsts, especially if the team that I'm trading with is kind of top heavy and fragile. Like if they've got Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams and Derrick Henry in the starting lineup and the bench is looking a little bit rough, I might just ask about their 2027 first instead. And I'll probably even overpay to get it. I'll pay more for that pick than I would pay for their immediate season first round pick. But yeah, you want to just be stacking up all those picks. Other than that, you can acquire rookies because rookies are the one group of players that collectively are going to gain value from one year to the next. JJ Zacharyson has studied this. As a whole, the current rookie class will be more valuable next year than they are now. They're going to be busts. They're going to be guys that lose value, but I think there's still time to buy low on players like Byshal Tuten, Luther Burden, Matthew Golden, even Trevion Henderson before they potentially break out and gain tons and tons of value. And you can trade for injured players because they don't score points and they're typically a good bet to gain value as they approach their return or get back on the field. I would stay away from running backs with career-threatening injuries like Najee Harris or James Conner, but like Joe Burrow is a great trade target for a rebuilder. Somebody like CeeDee Lamb or Brandon Ayuk, even though these guys aren't out for the whole season, they can still be decent targets if you're getting a discount right now because you don't need the points. Other people might need points right now, and these guys are almost certainly going to increase in value, fetch a larger return in a trade down the line, maybe even during this season. And your third objective after trading away depreciating assets and bringing in assets that are going to gain value is to get the 101. And obviously, if you can complete those first two goals, then you are well on your way to accomplishing this one. But if you're considering a rebuild, you should take stock of your league. Look at the standings. Are you competing with anyone for the 101 right now? That can help you determine how aggressive you need to be, how quickly you need to move players. If you have the luxury of being patient, you can be more tactical. You can be more picky about the trades that you accept. You can shop around more. You can try to wait for sell windows to open up after good games. You kind of have a seller's market on your hands, right? Because there aren't a lot of people moving productive assets. So you kind of corner the market. If you're in a league where there are multiple other teams trying to rebuild, the reality is you're probably going to have to take a little bit less for your players, and you're probably going to have to be a little bit more urgent about moving them if you want to lock up that one-on-one pick. And I think that you should be trying to do that. Now, we're going to close out today's video by looking at a rebuild that I started this week. This team started 0-3. I was 10th in points. So it was a pretty easy call for me to start the rebuild. I also checked where I was sitting in max points for, and I was in 11th place, not that far ahead of the team, in 12th. And I thought I had an opportunity to go ahead and jump the gun on the rebuild, get ahead of the competition. I had a bunch of underperforming players across the board. Ladd McConkey, Travis Hunter, Colston Loveland, Chase Brown, Tony Pollard, Stephon Diggs, Trevor Lawrence. It was too much for the team to overcome. Now, I didn't just say in the chat, at all, I'm rebuilding, come overpay for my players. What I did was I started firing out offers to just about every manager that I thought might be interested. I sent multiple different offers to the same person to give them options. I sent DMs to people. These are the 5 trades that I was able to get done in just 2 days. First one was pretty low stakes. I traded Jake Browning to the Joe Burrow manager for a 2026 third. Then I was able to make a bigger deal. And this is what I was talking about, packaging assets to get a first round pick. I traded away Tua, Pollard, and Stephon Diggs for a 2026 first. All 3 of those guys feel like they are on the downswing, that they are declining in value, and I don't see a big rebound coming. So I was thrilled to cash out on those players for a first round pick. Next, I sent away George Pickens and Juwan Jennings for a first and a third round pick. George Pickens is one of those guys that you might think, do we really need to trade him, right? He's 24 years old. He's still a good wide receiver. Maybe I just hold on to him. I'm taking the first. It's just so much safer, right? Anything can happen with George Pickens. He could underperform. He could get injured. He could be on a bad team next year. We just don't know what's going to happen. What I do know is I am locked into no worse than having the 112 in the 2026 class, and I suspect probably an earlier pick than that. And I can do pretty much whatever I want with that. I can go buy next year's George Pickens with that. So I felt good about that trade. Next one is kind of a, take it or leave it trade. I sent Ladd McConkey and Ramondre Stevenson for Teteroa McMillan. I did recently move McMillan ahead of Ladd in my dynasty rankings. And just in general, I would rather have a younger player. I'd rather have a rookie player than a non-rookie if the values are similar, because more value insulation and generally more big time value upside if things work out well. And the last deal was to send away Chase Brown for a second, third, and fourth for a pretty strong contending team. The second could easily be very late. So I think it's a fair deal for someone to potentially buy low on the volume that Chase Brown is getting. But again, just a player I think is trending in the wrong direction. The offense is going to struggle all season. And there's no guarantees for Chase Brown long-term, just with his production and performance so far in the league and his prior draft capital. So this is what the roster looks like now after all of those trades. Notice I have really one non-rookie stud that I'm building around in Jaden Daniels, not a guy that I'm going to look to trade on this team. I have a ton of picks, 4 firsts already this year and 4 seconds. And I have rookies. I have McMillan, I have Hunter, I have Loveland. You have to hope some of those guys are going to come around and finish the season strong. And, a couple of veterans still kicking around. Hopefully I can find suitors for Trevor Lawrence, Dallas Goedert, Cooper Kupp. But at this point, I am firmly in control of the 101, and I should be ready to roll again in 2026 with all of these assets accruing value over the next 6 to 8 months. Anyway, that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you for supporting the channel. If you enjoy my Dynasty content and you want to see new videos each and every week, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you want even more Dynasty content from me, you can become a YouTube member by hitting the plus on the subscribe button or the link in the description, whichever one you prefer. That's going to get you access to all kinds of exclusive perks like private Discord channels where you can ask me questions, weekly live streams where I give long form answers to your biggest Dynasty questions, and my top 250 Dynasty rankings updated weekly with trade value tiers and detailed notes as well. So I'll be back soon, guys, with another Dynasty video, and I hope I'll see you then.